So, welcome, Edgar.
Thank you, Mark.
It's a huge pleasure and honour to invite Edgar Broughton here to the Columbia Institute for Ideas and Imagination. I'm Mark Mazower. I'm a historian, and we're here today to talk about something that I think historians have not even begun to think how to answer, which is, what was it that just exploded in the 60s? Where did that come from? What had made it possible? And there's nobody better to help us think about this, I think, than you.
Okay.
So I appreciate your taking the time to be with us. So can we start there, Edgar? That question, if you think about that, what was it about? How do you explain what happened?
I think it was probably a combination of things. If you speak to people from the Caribbean that came to England in the 50s, and well before obviously, but that was a big push after the war. They described the place as drab, dirty, grey.
Yeah.
All the men wearing brown and black and navy blue, that kind of thing. And I think after the war, of course, in quotes, we won the war, and I think that gave us a kind of a perspective on what had been before. Mm-hmm. For example, women were now working with machines and driving tractors on farms, and they'd done so. There'd been quite a huge societal kind of change, and I think art always sort of if it isn't leading, it's catching up by the coattails.
Yeah, and
I'm not quite sure which it was, but I think what happened was there was an explosion of ideas. And also this kind of assertion of I do what I like.
Exactly.
And one of those things was that all the kind of rigours around the music business, and I imagine publishing and other things as well, started to change. So, for example, when I first started listening to contemporary music, bands had an A&R man, if they had a record label, and he told them what to play, what songs. They went in the studio and the producer actually dictated how it was done.
Yes.
And said, thanks very much, boys, off you go. And that was it.
Yeah.
And we'd heard about these people in America who were writing their own songs on the West Coast. And fascinating stuff was starting to happen. By the time the band went to London, well, it was already like going to another planet. I remember, Notting Hill and around Portobello Road and stuff. Everybody trying to be as kind of outrageously fashionable and dressed as they could. Everything from military uniforms to all kinds of stuff. And kind of, it might sound strange, but I remember back home in Warwick and Leamington Spa, I remember on a Saturday afternoon we'd put all our sort of bell bottoms on. We actually had bells on our trousers and stuff, and ribbons and stuff. Walked down the main parade in Leamington Spa on a Saturday afternoon, and we used to hear old ladies saying things like, "If he was mine, I'd murder him."
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yes.
It was, and I don't think it was just me. No. I think a lot of people were trying to break away from that incredibly sort of strictured, formalised, formatted kind of life that we were living. And of course, it's like a dam. Once there's a little crack and then there's a hole, you do get this flood and this sort of tumultuous kind of energy.
Yes.
I mean, even my mum and dad, they were sort of more or less hippies like we were, really. But they were sort of swallowed up by it and carried along with it as well, and there weren't many of their generation that we knew where we lived on a council estate.
Yes.
But they weren't the only ones. When we went to London, we realised that this thing was happening to all generations, bits of all generations,
So you've already said so many things that I think it would be really interesting to explore. That feeling that we're going to do what we like, where that came from, because other generations in the past must have had that feeling that they couldn't act on it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you could act on it.
Yeah.
That would be one interesting thing.
Yeah, and partly it was that sort of, it was like a childish, we won the war, didn't we? Right. We could do anything. Not only did we win the war and we could do anything, but we actually, what did we win? What have we got now?
Yes.
And it was, well, do what we like.
Yes.
You know, and as kids, I remember going to school, and even teachers, they used to try to tell me stuff like, why should I listen to you?
Yes.
You know, and not, I mean, it wasn't on the basis that they were a teacher,
yes,
or that they were an adult.
Yes.
It was what they said.
Yes.
Suddenly, it was possible to listen to one teacher and another teacher and decide that one's useless.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, like I used to go home and say to my parents, I'm not going in that class anymore. You can't do that. And my dad saying, and my mum, when I was at school, you know, you daren't say boo to a goose.
Right.
And we were having full-blown arguments,
Yes.
you know, and stuff like that.
Tell me a little more about your parents, your family, the way you grew up, what they gave, because you suggested that there was more, in fact, non-conformism, if I can put it that way, among your parents' generation. We like to think now that some of them were really all for this.
Yeah, I think they were. I mean, most of our near neighbours used to say to my mum and dad, they should be going to university, not kicking around the country playing rock and roll, you know, or whatever they thought it was.
Didn't your mum make your sandwiches? Did I read that? Or was that an urban
She
myth?
drove the van for years. My dad sort of made lights that worked off the drum pedals, and I mean they were absolutely full blown into what we were doing. Couldn't have been more supportive. In fact, if I'm honest, my brother was a little bit less lazy than me, which is why I wrote the songs, so I didn't have to run around. No, but he was kind of busy, always active and stuff. And my mum and dad sort of, the more we did, the more they supported it.
Yeah.
So, you know, there were all kinds of, I mean, our house was full of kids, always, you know, and all the kids used to say, I wish my mum and dad were like yours, you know. And I thought, well, you don't know the whole story.
What were their, what work had they done?
Work?
Yes.
Oh, my dad was he was a paint sprayer.
Yes.
And my mum worked in various shops and laundries and things like that she'd done.
So what do you think it meant for them when you guys...
They lived it through us.
They lived it through you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when we actually got a road crew, telling my mum that she couldn't drive the van anymore.
Yes.
Oh, she was horrible.
So the rebellion against the war wasn't just your rebellion, it was their rebellion too, actually.
Yeah, it was. And that about expression. I want to express myself. Yes. But nobody ever says that. It's just a feeling.
Yes.
And then they do, and people say, oh, they've expressed themselves. You know, it's strange. But
I suppose also there's the fact that, of course, people might feel this today, but the difference is that today there's much greater self-consciousness about fashion in music. So everybody expresses themselves, defines themselves against what happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you didn't have that, really, did you?
Not really, no. No, only in music.
Yes.
Certainly not style, although I'm careful about that now because I look back at some of the clothes, sort of pre-war.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And very stylish.
Yes.
And that all got sort of... I mean, I used to make fun of it because it wasn't our clothes when I was a kid. That's what you're supposed to do, isn't it?
Right.
But I feel a bit bad about it now.
Right.
Because people were always stylish, weren't they?
Right.
But my mum and dad, basically, they were socialists. And my mum was like red hot socialist. And she wanted us to sort of do what we wanted and have the life that we wanted. And that was fantastic, you know.
So maybe we can go there for a little bit because... You know, anybody who's listened to any of your music knows how important the politics is often in a much more explicit way than for many other bands at that time. And I like that about it. And can you say something about the politics of how you grew up, the household? I mean, what did actually socialism mean then as compared with now, maybe?
One of the things in our house, and again, this is about expression, I suppose. If you're going to have if you're going to be part of making a world free,
Yes.
You know, we believe that the revolution starts in here
Yes.
and in your house before,
Yes.
you know, and then your street, and then
Yes.
your village, and so on. So speaking properly
Yes.
was important in our house. So I'd say, that ain't fair. What do you mean ain't? Isn't. Over and over and over again. To the point that some people thought that my brother and I were quite posh.
Right.
You know, local
Right.
people. But those were the kind of things that were important. If you're going to express it well.
Well.
You know. But in terms of being socialist, they thought that, like I do, that if we once got it together to fix the bottom of the pyramid,
Yes.
wealth will flow.
Yes.
And I still feel embarrassed and uncomfortable living in a world where people are sleeping in the street.
Yeah.
It makes me uncomfortable. And they were, all of that stuff, I mean, that's where it comes from
Yes.
in me, you know, their kind of values and beliefs. And so I suppose strident, protesty music
Yes.
fitted their idea, although they probably never thought of it before, of course. But when we came along in that sense, I think, and produced that stuff, I think they thought, well, isn't this what we want? This is
Yes.
socialist music.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
political, about something, rather than, you know, I love this girl, she doesn't love me, so I'm going to kill myself. You know,
Yeah.
something a little bit more complex than those kind of love songs that were, you know,
Yeah.
the radio was just full of nothing else, actually.
And would you, so you grew up in Warwick. Say something about that. What was that like that? I mean, the war was very close. What was it like to grow up there? What sort of place was it?
It was and still is a really repressive, narrow little place. Beautiful. I mean, the architecture, the castle, for example, is superb. And but you can't buy anything there. You can't buy a pair of socks. You can't buy a packet of guitar strings. It's all antiques. I mean, literally all antiques, except for the odd pub and a restaurant. And of course, everywhere we went, people were kind of not against us, but they looked down their noses a bit at us, our family.
Why?
Well, because we were different. You know, we said stuff about stuff. You know,
Right.
yeah. I mean, my brother got a scholarship to go to Warwick School. It's a public school.
Yeah.
And he had a particular kind of hair that only grows like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And they thought he'd got a Beatle cut.
Yes.
Well, he didn't even like the Beatles, but so the headmaster told him, "You will have a parting." So we went to the barber, and the barber said, "I can't put a parting in that hair."
Yeah.
So the barber had photographs taken of him trying to put the part right. Go back to the school, and the headmaster said, "If I want a parting in his hair, he will have one, or he'll be expelled." And he was expelled.
So that's the sort of thing you were rebelling
That's what
against.
we were up against, yeah.
Yes.
So my dad got a sandwich board
Yes.
and marched up and down outside the school for 2 weeks.
Right. So protest was in the family.
Yeah, they didn't like it at all,
Yes.
but the kids at the school used to come out and say, "Hey, yeah, Mr. Broughton, you're doing great, thanks for this," and,
Yeah,
you know.
I see.
And the teachers hated it because... And we were quite... I mean, I can say it now, I mean... If anybody wonders where all the graffiti came from in those days, it came from us.
Forgive me.
And there was a lot of it all over the area, all over the West Midlands, in fact.
So if I think about your music, there's the politics side.
Yeah.
But there's this other side that speaks very much to me that that is a lyrical. I mean, some of the you know, some of my favourite songs of yours, Hotel Room or others, they're like poems. So would you say something about writing, when that started to means, you know, was it just something, I don't know, was that something you started to do at school, or was it nothing to you, or how did that emerge?
Yeah, well, I was a bit of a square peg in a round hole, really. I didn't fit in very easily with people. I think today I might even be, somebody might have decided that I was on the spectrum of some description. Even I don't know, but so for example, my brother would go. He was very gregarious, very social. He'd go out, And people say, where's your brother? Where, you know, oh, he's not coming and that. So when I did turn up, especially when we were in the band, it was like a big deal. And I thought, oh, I quite like this.
Right.
So I made myself as scarce as possible and kept to my own sort of self most of the time. And became a sort of beat poet in my own mind. Can
I ask if there were people you read that you liked?
Kerouac, all that kind of that group, and others, you know.
Had school given you any interest in poetry?
School did nothing for me like that at all. You know, I mean, even in music, we were asked to take an album in. You know. And
what did you take?
I took in Live at the Copacabana, which was a blues album.
Yes.
Fabulous stuff. And the teacher, bless him, he was a failed cellist. He said, it's, what can one say? He said, it's just more primitive music.
Yeah.
So I sort of had a few words with him about that. Got a Saturday detention for war trouble. You know, but I was always on detention because I was always arguing with them. But writing, I just sometimes I whatever I've got notes on a phone, I'll just write something down and look at it again and juggle it around, and it's a little bit like having a sandwich. I'm hungry, so I want a sandwich, so I write a bit, and it's another kind of appetite to do it. And then I think I look back at it sometimes, oh. That could be a song, or that is a song, or I write it as a song, you know, now. But back in those days, it was an itch that needed scratching, if you like.
Yeah.
It was something that I had to do now and then.
Yes.
Yeah.
It strikes me, and you know, God knows I don't know that much to compare it with, but you at least 2 songs of yours were about refugees at a time when people now people are very conscious about that as an issue.
Yeah.
But it's very striking to me that.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like people living in the street. I mean, when I was a kid, I knew this old guy. He was a captain in the British Army in the First World War, and he was what we called a tramp. You know.
Yes.
And he didn't want to live anywhere. He'd had enough of the world. Lovely guy. I used to go for bike rides and I'd look for him up this road and stop and chat with him when I saw him. And everybody used to say, what are you doing talking to that dirty old tramp? I said, he's not dirty. He's just, you know, he's just walking about. That's how he wants to live. Why? You know. So anyway, the point that I'm making here is that I guess there are still a few people like him who, for one reason or another, actually do take to the road. But the most of the people that we see in an urban situation are pretty desolate and hopeless, really.
Yes.
And that is like being a refugee.
Yes.
It's the one thing that terrifies me, being stateless, being homeless. I say terrifies me, I mean for everybody else.
Yes.
You know, I mean, look what's happening in Gaza. I mean, it's just...
Yes.
It's unthinkable, and yet it's happened.
Absolutely.
You know? So the songs, I mean, it's like the new album, you know, that I brought out last October. A lot of my friends said, it's a bit dark, isn't it?
Yes, but
what
you were
do
drawn
expect?
to reality is dark.
Well, yeah, that's good. I like that. You know, it's...
Yes.
Yeah.
And can I... the Evening Over Rooftops, which has this very powerful but elusive lyrics.
Yeah.
Where what was it? Was there a story behind that, or was there just thoughts came in?
There is a story, and it's one of those things, you know, we talk about the muse. The muse happens or it doesn't. So sometimes, you know, you're slaving away over a hot piece of paper, as opposed to a stove. And sometimes it just comes. A whole thinker. Both Hotel Room and Evening Over Rooftops, as it happened, came in one...
Yeah.
I don't mean literally like I was dictated. It was dictated to me, but it came in one sitting, as it were. And Hotel Room, I did change it a little bit. On the other hand, Evening Over Rooftops, it was a summer's day, and I was sitting in my flat.
Where were you?
In North London, Finchley Road.
Yes.
And not far from
Northwood Hall.
Yeah. And I looked out of the window, and 3 birds flew off a roof in front of me. It was just a beautiful sunset. And I don't know why, but I saw the rest of them that weren't there. I imagined this column just almost like a chimney in this roof that all these birds were coming out of.
Yeah.
It wasn't there, but these three birds kind of fostered the idea.
Yeah.
And I went and got a piece of, fool's cut paper out of a box, got a pen, and wrote the lyric. And the next day, and I say when I mean by that, I literally wrote the lyric.
Yes.
It was in my head. Yes. And as I wrote one line, the next line came. So the next day, another lovely sunny day, and the roadie had come with the guitar player to pick me up in the car. And he'd got an open top car, and my mate was sitting in the back with his an acoustic guitar. And I said, "What are you doing with that, Victor?" And he said, "Oh, I've got some chords." He said, "They're really simple," he said, "but I thought you might like it." He said, "Anyways." So I said, "Play them." So he played the chords, and I pulled a piece of paper out and sang the song. And we phoned up Peter Jenner, our producer, and there was a slot in Abbey Road 2 days later, and we went in and recorded it. We didn't rehearse it or anything, really. It just unfolded like the song does unfold, itself.
There's times like that when you think there really is some mystical power in the universe, that is putting things together.
I'm sure there is. I don't know the nature of it, not really. I don't like it having a name, But I'm convinced of that, absolutely, yeah.
Talking of Peter Jenner, I was, thinking back to this question of what was going on, what was empowering you guys, because 1 minute you're listening to Muddy Waters LPs in Warwick, the next minute you're playing to 120,000 people in Hyde Park.
Yeah.
And figures like that were quite important as sort of the ways in which they created. Do you think I'm right? And what interests me about Jenner is that here's a guy who went to a very posh school, went to
LSE,
Cambridge, was a lecturer at LSE,
So,
but then this lures him.
Yeah, Peter was sort of he was very political as well, and I think he saw in us what my mum and dad saw in us, as it were. Mm-hmm. I can get involved with this. I can relate to it, and we were really close on all the strategizing and everything. Everything that we did together, really. But how it happened was we were living in Colville Terrace in Notting Hill. And we're staying with some friends. We got no money or anything. And this lovely girl that I'd met a couple of days before came by the house, and she said, "Oh, hi." She said, "Are you a band?" I said, "Yeah, trying to be." And she said, "Listen, there's an agency around the corner, called Black Hill." So 2 or 3 days later, we all put all our clothes, our sort of our uniform, our sort of work clothes on, and went round to see Jenner. And he said, there's a gig at I can't remember the university. It's near the Albert Hall. Anyway, he said, "The band's let me down. Can you play tomorrow night?"
Imperial College, perhaps.
Imperial College. So I said, "Will you be there?" He said, "Oh yeah." So I said, "Okay." So we went down there and played this gig, and afterwards he said, "I've never seen anything like it in my life." He said, "I have never seen anybody do what you did." He said, "That's it." He said, "You're signed." So that was that. But Peter, you see, we'd already, before we met him, we'd already met people like Mus Murray, who had a magazine called Gandalf's Garden. Mm-hmm. And then we met Hoppy Hopkins, who was part of the International Times, the Oz crew. We knew all of them. I mean, as soon as we moved into Notting Hill Gate, it was first port of call. Yeah. Check out who we thought were the intelligentsia of the new movement, alternative newspapers, magazines.
Which is alternative, but for some people it's going to explode into a multi-million-dollar business in a few years, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Well, we all knew that writing was on the wall when people started walking out of Woolworths with Paisley carrier bags.
And what was your reaction to that?
Horrified. Mm-hmm. Well, it's like somebody taking something off you that doesn't belong to them. I mean, of course, it will inevitably happen. I mean, if a multi-corporation can exploit something of yours or mine, they will. And if we say, well, we'll take you to court, that's all right. I mean, there's nothing that a big, powerful company can't sort of ruin if they want to.
Because what strikes me thinking about what I know about the band is that there was a kind of act of resistance on your part, it seems to me, in the 70s and 80s. People you've been playing with in 69 and 70 and 71 go off and become stratospheric names, and they tour America and so on. And the act of resistance I'm talking about, but I may be imagining it, this didn't happen to you in that way, but my sense is that you didn't want it to happen to you. Am I?
You kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if we were going to do that. I mean, Pete Jenner tried to get us to America, but there was resistance. They didn't like the fact that what we did.
You were much too political for most of the American market,
absolutely. Weren't you? And then much later, we had another manager. That was a story in itself. I mean, you could write books about that terrible thing we did, but just gangsters who we ended up with for a while. And they arranged for us to go to Italy. Interesting. Nobody had ever been interested in that before. So we meet this guy, Carlo, in the office. And yes, he says, when you come to Italy, he said, you will be number 10 or 11 or something in the charts. Sorry? Could you just run that by me again? How do you know where we will be in the Italian charts when we come over? He said, we fixed this. So I turned around to the manager and I said, no. And we just left the room and said, no, we're not having anything to do with that. So often, even with people that we were working with, we'd say, no, we can't do that, There were a few people that we knew, if we'd done that, I mean, they'd never speak to us again.
Yes.
Important people in our lives. Well, Mum and Dad, for example.
So if we come back to this question that we started with why the 60s, the 60s was this kind of explosion of people saying they were going to do what they jolly well liked. But in your case, that lasted a while, and then people were asking you to do things that you didn't want, and it was becoming an industry.
Yeah. I mean, lots of bands came to us because we were it was almost like we invented free music.
Right.
And it was our fault.
Can you say something about that movement? Because I think that's a very important part of the story.
Well, Peter Jenner, obviously, he put the High Park concerts, the free concerts together. That was his idea. Right.
So this was summer of 69.
Yeah.
These huge things, 100,000 people, 120,000 people.
And we played with Blind Faith.
Yes, of which there's some footage, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And after that, we even did a free concert in was it Essen in Germany for Electrola. They paid for it, but it's a free concert. And bands were getting nervous, so we'd do a big festival, and bands would come in the dressing room. You've got to stop this. I said, what? You've got to stop playing for free because you'll ruin the business. I said, what? I said, what are you going to start playing for free? No, we're not. Well, then what are you talking about? What's it got to do with you? What we do,
Yes.
And of course, the other thing was lots of bands, because we were proto-punks, no doubt about it. Lots of bands didn't think we were very good musicians, and they were kind of right.
When you say proto-punk, in your mind, what does that mean?
It means that Johnny Rotten
went
to the Roundhouse, and he saw us play a song called Gone Blue. Mm-hmm. And he says in his book, that's not a hippie song, is it? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I think that we were at least 20-30% of his whole idea. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what was I saying?
Proto-punk that you...
I think we were ahead of our time in terms of that punk idea.
Yes.
Because it was a little bit make a wardrobe out of a biscuit tin.
Yes.
Rather than the other way around, which people were doing.
Yes.
So, but also, it was quite important for us to not be roped in the whole with everybody else.
Yeah. Right.
To the extent that, like, people sort of looked down on us. As I said, they didn't think we were very musical, like the punks, you know, and were. And so we'd get a band come along, or a promoter or the manager would come along and say, look, we're not going on after you. You know, no, sorry, we're going on after you. We're not going on before you. We're top of the bill.
Yes, yes.
Because most German promoters that had seen us put us on last.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't always about being top of the bill. I didn't care,
Yes.
really. So, you know, we'd say, yeah, okay, you go on last then.
Yeah.
They didn't want to go on last tomorrow night.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really didn't, because it wasn't that we were great musicians or anything, but we completely exhausted the energy of the audience.
Yes.
Completely. To the extent that they just sat on the floor at the end. So imagine coming on top of the bill,
Yeah.
and the whole audience
I've
in a
seen
big
some of the
hall is
pictures.
just sitting on the floor because they're
Yes.
knackered. You know?
So I think you worked for a time later on in community youth stuff. And so that interested me because I wondered, thinking back to yourself, the age of the kids that you worked with, 20 or 30 years later, I don't know exactly how many it would have been, how were they different? How had the times changed for them compared with when you were that age?
Oh, well,
If they had.
the freedom that we were all after, that always has good and bad effects.
Yes.
And in some cases, there was a lot of freedom kicking around for a lot of years, and not many people doing very much about it. In other words, certainly parts of London, South London, where I lived, there was all kinds of a massive lack of resourcing of young people, and what they might want to do and stuff. In Wandsworth, where I was, fortunately, there was, it was what was it, the Jewel in the Crown, Maggie Thatcher's. Westminster and Wandsworth were.
Yeah.
So we had a good youth service. In fact, it's the only borough that still has got anything half decent, Wandsworth, now.
But those kids that you were working with, did they have the freedom, do you think, that you
They had the freedom, but they had more freedom, in a way.
Right.
But I knew where everything was, within a square circle of, say, 50, 60 miles.
Okay.
They didn't know where the West End was. And they lived in Battersea.
And how do you explain that?
They weren't resourced, they weren't educated.
Yeah.
And also, if you leave kids to their own devices, they do what they want to do, and they think that's what they should do.
Right.
And if nobody tells them, they don't know that the world's bigger, or that it could be better and more interesting if they learned, or if they did this, or whatever. So that was one of the things that I took on.
Right. But you're suggesting, one of the things that struck me about the 60s was, although it's against schools and against discipline, actually in the post-war moment, people one way or another, there was a terrific desire to learn and to educate, either to be educated through the school or to educate yourself in some other way. It was a sort of end of that Victorian self-education thing that had died out by the time you got to Thatcher.
Well, it occurs, doesn't it? There's no point being free if you don't know what to do with the time that you've now got. You know, I mean, I remember people older than my dad, I suppose more like my grandfather's kind of generation, coming to the end of their work and literally not knowing what to do at all. I mean, literally. Get up in the morning, get dressed, and just sit there like lost. Really, really lost. Because nobody considered that this isn't a machine that you can put in the cupboard when it finishes working, like a Hoover or or a washing machine you switch off. This is a human being and what they're going to do when they're not working. Nobody cared. Nobody thought about it at all. Just all these women say, get from under my feet. You know, I don't want you to sit around here all day, because they weren't used to it.
So coming back to those kids in Wandsworth, do you think one difference was that actually you had a terrific kind of drive that's connected to the socialism we were talking about the future, and maybe by the time you get to the Thatcher years, that's kind of waning. People don't have that sense they've got to get out and do something.
For sure. But I mean, it doesn't take long to galvanise people.
Right.
So, I mean, for example, some kids came to us and said, we want a radio station. So, okay, yeah, so well, we can't get involved in pirate radio because we work for Wandsworth Council. So we decided to get a licence and do it legally and properly. And a lot of the kids were sort of, that's not it though, is it? And I thought, you know what, you're right, really. There's something really glamorous about being a pirate radio on top of a tower block, you know? So it was, that's not the real thing, is it? We want to do it our way. And I get you, you know, but I said, if you want our resources, and we put a studio into this building, and we did. And we won the Philip Lawrence Award the first year for young people's initiatives against crime, because they actually ran the radio station.
Right.
I mean, supervised.
Yeah.
And I had a little technical crew, because I did all the technical stuff, trained them up and stuff. A couple of them are engineers now. But our idea was, you can do anything, but sometimes you have to play by the rules. You have to get what you want. But as soon as we got the radio station, as soon as we got our studio and stuff, and our licence, it was very easy to tell the people who were funding it, but if you don't let them do this, they won't carry on, and you know, and then the struggle for it to be free, to be what the young people wanted, began. Once we got that licence. But it's the same argument I've been making all my life, really. Why not? You know, and sometimes there is a why not, and it's a good one. But I want to hear it before I agree to not do something, you know. I also think that there was women had played a large part in the pre-explosion. Definitely. The way that they'd said, it's not like that anymore. Why you can't expect me to just stand at the stove all day, and I've been doing this, I've been doing that, and after the war. And of course, the women had got the vote and hadn't had it that long, really, in a way, in a sense. And there was all kinds of sort of little tentacles of what can we do with this more than because women still weren't equal. They're not now.
No,
I mean, I don't understand how any society can have a government that is supposed to set out how we are all going to live happily together when women get less wages. And it's almost like that's how it should be. And for me, it's not just about less money. It's the principle, the idea that half of the population, they don't really earn it, do they? You know, they're only women, you know. It's still
deep-rooted.
And I mean, in our house, that was really frowned upon, you know. My mum used to say to my dad, so when you retire, what are you going to do? Because I'm going to retire as well. So who's going to do the cooking? Stuff like that, you know. And it was a great household. It was a madhouse as well. When it was fractious, it was disgusting, really, horrible.
What had their parents done by way of work?
Well, my dad didn't know his dad. He was brought up by his dad's brother. He was a butcher. And of course the women didn't work at that point. My mum's dad, he was a woodworker. He called himself a cabinet maker, but he wasn't really. He was a carpenter and a poacher. And a scoundrel.
I guess one of the things one of the ways of putting what I'm interested in is if you could have approached your grandparents and said to them, you know, your grandson is going to be playing loud electric instruments in front of 120,000 people in 1945, they would have thought you were completely bonkers. And yet that's what happened in 1969. It's some huge social transformation that we haven't got our heads around, I think.
I mean, there's still bits of it that have sort of like stayed where they were. They haven't been addressed at all, really. Equal wages is one of them, but there are other things as well. But I think, like as I was saying, by the time we came to London, we could literally just walk down the street and somebody would say, "Oh, have you met this chap?" Wow, it seemed like everybody was involved in something kind of left-wing alternative, sort of agitprop, some...
Very open.
Yeah, very open.
Everybody open to you knocking
Yeah.
on their door, or
Yeah.
them knocking on your
Yeah.
door.
Yeah, and you could sort of... I mean, there were people like Caroline Clune at Release, you know, who were dealing with people who'd been busted and stuff. And I mean, they were... You could go around the office and sort of like have a cup of tea and chat about something.
Yes.
Like benefits that were coming up, or...
Yes.
People used to go around and, do you want us to do a benefit?
Yes.
Imagine that today.
Yes.
Actually calling around somebody's office and stuff, you'd text somebody, then you'd email, then you'd get your manager to phone and stuff.
And the Dole,
It's a community.
was the Dole part of this? Were you guys, was that enabling people to do this kind of thing, or was that not?
I suppose it was, but we didn't sign on really.
No.
Hardly ever, I don't
Yeah.
think. I did when we were back in Warwick and Leamington a little bit.
Yeah.
And until one day a woman said in the Dole office, she said, "You played at the pump rooms last week, didn't you?" And it was all over.
You were busted.
Yeah. But we, probably had about 50 quid off them altogether.
Yeah.
Never sort of had welfare really.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not what I do. I would if I needed
Yes.
it,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
But, yeah.
I don't want to exhaust your patience, and I find it very interesting.
No,
But-
it's I'm okay if we got time, haven't we?
Sure.
Yeah.
We didn't. There are lots of things. The other thing I very much wanted just to hear your thoughts on what America meant to you when you were growing up, because it seems to me it meant a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and it was important to you somehow.
Well, it was the freshest, most liberated music, as far as I was concerned, came from there first. So all those little West Coast bands like Pearls Before Swine, you know, and 20 bands I could mention that nobody remembers or knows about, you know. There was this energy, and it was... You just knew that this had got to be a little record label somewhere. This wasn't a major
Yes.
company job.
Yes.
You knew it. And so we thought, well, if they could do that, why can't we? And then, of course, we found out that
You could.
we could,
Yes.
and it was happening, you know. Yeah.
And then there's the blues as a kind of template.
Well, the
isn't it?
blues, of course, came before all that. I mean, that was our first kind of port of call, really. To be honest, somebody said, why did you become a blues band in the first place? Well, 3 chords.
Yes.
It's easy,
Yes.
you know. And also, I could do a good impersonation of Muddy Waters
Yes.
and Howlin' Wolf, even. But like Eric Broughton.
Yes.
Yeah. But
there was this other political side of America, wasn't there? Vietnam and
yeah, and the Fugs. You remember them?
no.
Oh, the Fugs had they ran a bookshop. Mm-hmm. That's basically what they did. Tuli Kupferberg, that was his name, and they did they weren't a band really, but they made an album. Mm-hmm. But they made this sort of recording outside the Pentagon, and they had an exorcism, Out Demons Out.
That wasn't the origin of yours, was
Yeah.
it? It was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I thought, I'm nicking that.
Yes.
And of course we could do it. I mean, Arken football pitch.
Yes.
A festival, a 3-day festival. And we get there, and one of the guys in Pink Floyd said to me, he said, do you know, he said, that the cops are actually beating people with their sticks. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. Next minute, 2 police dragged this girl, a young woman about 19, 20 or something like that, by her hair, they're pulling her, and she's bleeding all down the side of her face. So I tried to stop this guy and say, what's going on? And he just pushed me out of the way, like really violently. I nearly fell over. So our gig comes around, our time set, and I go on stage. And I said, we're not going to play until the police in the director's box are gone. Told everybody why, what was happening and stuff. And they just sat there, of course, until the crowd all turned on them. Out Demons Out. Chanting at them. And I said, we won't stop until you go. So I said, it's up to you. And Rauch, Dämonen, Rauch. And it lasted about 20 minutes. And then we saw them file out of the thing down the steps, and the whole crowd was, yeah. I love those moments because there's real power in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you've got a big enough audience, it's amazing what you can do.
Yeah.
Really.
Good.
You know, I mean, one of our court appearances, one of our many court appearances, took place in Kiel, over the Kiel University. You remember the? I think it was 8 students were killed by the National Guard at Kent University,
Yes,
Ohio.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
And there was
a protest at Kiel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we went along there and played, but we actually gave out some spray cans of paint as well, which was the real cause of the trouble. They didn't like the slogans in the new refectory, but yeah, I didn't like the idea of people being killed at university either.
Yeah, of course.
So we go to court and big fines and stuff. And there's pictures, lovely photos of all the graffiti, the most intelligent graffiti you've ever seen in your life. They're shown around, and I had a look at it. And I asked the judge, I said, could I have a copy of these photographs? And he looked at me like, be very careful.
Have you ever written about those years?
No.
Have you ever been tempted to?
I have been, but I'm too lazy, really. There's a guy called Brian Banks he's living in Poland at the moment, and he's looking at the idea of writing sort of memoir-y thing. I don't want a biography, you know. Chronology's the thing that does me anyway. I can't remember anything in terms of dates. But I mean, there's stories that are like, you wouldn't believe. No. Some of the stories. I mean, the story I told you about the chasing the police car.
Yes.
That's one of the milder ones.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
Yes.
Know, absolutely.
The same day that you'd saved somebody from jumping off Hornsey Bridge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Incredible stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to tie you out before this evening. It's lovely to talk to you about this. I remember when I was thinking about this, and I was watching. There's a small clip of an interview you gave outside the Roundhouse with some guy, and I was just captivated by how you analysed things, and I thought I would like to have this conversation.
Okay.
So we're having
Finally,
it. And
after all these years.
I'm very happy that you agreed to do this.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good. Well, I hope you got something of use.
I expect we did. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.